Well, on the night in question, I got to be honest with you. I'm no angel. I want to stress that, but I wasn't no Ronnie Biggs either. You know, I was out on the night in question, stealing a car with two other friends of mine. One of them was my brother-in-law, and one was a person I only met on the night in question, Darren Hall. Now, within 5 or 10 minutes of me meeting Darren Hall, I knew there was something wrong with him. You know what I mean? In the sense, like, I would describe it as he wasn't a full shilling, you know, a few bricks short of a full load, because that was my vocabulary in those days. You know, I learned to speak properly when I was in prison, but I learned about it when they knocked my door on the 1st of November, and they said, "Are you Michael O'Brien?" And I said, "Yes." And they said, "We're arresting you for the murder of Philip Saunders." And I can remember my exact words to the police officer: "Who the effing hell is Philip Saunders?" Didn't have a clue, you know, who they were talking about. You know, yes, I knew there was a murder in the city, but I didn't know I didn't know him by name, and I didn't know who was responsible. So it came as a really big shock to be conveyed into a police car to Canton Police Station, where I was subjected to handcuffed. I was handcuffed to hot radiators. I was abused in the police station, and my human rights was, you know, denial of access to lawyers, etc. I went through the mill, and it was an awful experience, and I don't think even now I don't think I could go through that again.
Michael, so you are now in custody in relation to Philip Saunders' murder, a man you know nothing of. It's a name that was suddenly given to you. What happens then? What happens in the interview?
Well, they were trying to get me to confess. They were trying to get me to confess and implicate my co-accused, Ellis Sherwood. Unbeknown to me, Darren Hall was being interviewed in another room, and he'd done 14 different statements. And he basically said that me and Ellis Sherwood murdered Philip Saunders while he was the lookout. But, you know, there was another 13 other different statements saying 1 minute he didn't do it, then he didn't know who done it. And there was a guy with ginger hair. His name was Tony. You could clearly see this guy had psychological problems and didn't know what he was talking about. And he couldn't have done the murder. He was a very vulnerable person, Darren Hall, which I'll explain a bit more about as we go along. Unfortunately, at my trial, I did not know that Darren Hall had confessed to a crime he hadn't done before, and that was kept away from the defence.
So Darren Hall had learning difficulties, did he?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, I mean, I called him. I remember when I was in court, and this probably make a few people laugh in the seriousness of it all. I called him a bungalow because I didn't have a vocabulary. I was only 19. I come from a place called Ely. You know, I wasn't very well educated. And the judge said to me, "What do you mean when you call him a bungalow?" I said, "Well, he got fuck all upstairs." And the jury started laughing. But that was my best way. I'm not a psychologist. I wasn't a psychiatrist. But I just knew there was something wrong with the guy. And if I can pick that up, and I'm a 19-year-old who don't know much, surely the police who were trained in these matters would have known. And sadly, I found out later on they did know, but they were so desperate to get a conviction. We were the fall guys. It was as simple as that.
So, Michael, I'm interested in what evidence the police believe they had during the course of that interview that they put to you. Did you have a solicitor?
I did have a solicitor, yes, but he didn't. I asked him to make a complaint because I was handcuffed to a hot radiator for long periods of time. They couldn't account for our whereabouts in the police station. The police report, I don't know if you're aware of that, which identified 115 breaches of the Police and Criminal Evidence Act, which is shocking. You know, I didn't know my rights when I was 19. I never really been in trouble. I was always on the periphery of in you know, like with cars and stuff like that, and with the boys trying to fit in and be one of the boys. You know, I didn't have a clue what I was doing. And as I said, on a night in question, we were out trying to steal a car for joyriding purposes. And when I was in that police station, I told them this. Page of my statement, I did lie first of all because I was more concerned about the car being done for the car than I was for the murder, because I knew I didn't do the murder. I knew.
So what did they, Michael? What did they accuse you of doing? What evidence did they have that they put to you that you were involved with Philip Saunders' murder?
Darren Hall's evidence. Darren Hall is my coach.
Yeah.
You know that we did it. That's all I had at that stage. But they released us on bail pending further inquiries. We were released on the 3rd of November after a horrendous time in the police station where they denied us food and water, denied us access to our lawyers, and we were freed on bail. I was so damaged by that. I ended up in a mental hospital called Whitchurch in Cardiff because I was so damaged by what they did in that 3 days.
And so what happens after that? So you're put on bail, you go home. What's the next thing that happens?
Well, on the 10th of November, then we got another knock on the door. We're arresting you. We got new evidence. So, that you killed Philip Saunders. So you can imagine I was horrified, being taken to the police station again. I thought, oh, here we go again. I'm going to get more grief now. What are they going to do to me? And I was scared. I got to be honest with you. I was only a kid and I was scared out of my wits. I'd never been in the police station before this case, so I didn't know what to expect. But what evidence they had a person called Christopher Chicken Helen Morris, who were in serious trouble with the police at the time, but I didn't know this. And they reckons they seen me and Ellis in town spending money a couple of days later in town, spending money from the robbery. But there's only one problem with that. Ellis Sherwood was locked up on the night he said that he saw us. He was in the magistrate's court. He didn't get released till later on the next day, yet they still took his evidence in chief.
But you are then charged and you go to trial. Are you of the opinion this just hasn't got any legs to go? This just won't happen. We're going to be freed.
Well, there was another significant piece of evidence that happened on the second arrest while we were in the police station. A police officer alleges that me and Ellis Sherwood made a confession. We were talking to each other, and it was an incriminating conversation. That conversation was a total fabrication.
So he just made it up.
He did make it up. I said to him that I was scared about my wife was in the police station because she was heavily pregnant with my daughter, who was 8 months, the one I lost. And what actually happened then was they went, tell him the truth, Ellis. You know what I mean? I don't know what's happening. Being on remand means nothing. Or, well, if you don't tell him, I'm going to tell him. Shut your mouth. It's only a hole and there's grass in us. And the confession went something like that. Now, I knew then when they put that confession to me at 11 o'clock on the 10th of November, I knew they were framing me and there was nothing I could do. And that was
what did your solicitor say to that?
Well, my solicitor knew he had a previous client where this police officer had done the same before. And I wanted to bring it up in court. Okay. And when I went to court, he said to me, don't bring it up. And I said, no, I'm bringing it up.
So they get a piece of evidence that they fabricate. Yeah. They use that to bring a charge against you. Just give me a sense of how you're feeling on the eve of the trial.
Suicidal. I just didn't think things like this happened. I always believed in the police, to be honest. Even though I was on the periphery of things, some of my mates used to say to me, oh, the police are trying to frame me for this. And I used to say, oh, there's no smoke without fire. You must be doing something, And I was that naive. And then here I was seeing with my own eyes that I was being framed or alleged, attempted to be framed. At that stage, I wasn't found guilty. But I asked my lawyers, what do you think is going to happen with the case? And he said to me, if Darren Hall goes in the witness box and says what he said in his statement, you're doomed. You're going down. And that sent shivers down my spine.